It's now my pleasure to hear from Brian Sherman. And this will be our final speaker for today.
Brian?
So for the sake of time, I'd like to introduce Brian Sherman. Brian is the Senior Vice President for Business Development at the Arizona Commerce Authority. Brian has dedicated more than a decade of professional work to creating and building a supporting system for Arizona technology entrepreneurs in a variety of positions. His work is focused on technology-based economic development, including entrepreneurship, early-stage capital formation, technology commercialization, and innovation in public policy and finance. Mr. Sherman also has an MBA from the W.P. Carey School of Business at Arizona State University. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you very much. The crowd has thinned a little bit. I think they're pouring beers in that bus on the north curb. Let's get them back in here. Thanks for having me, Otis and Michael. It's a pleasure to be here. I work with Bennett, and you heard from Bennett earlier. I'm with the Arizona Commerce Authority, and I apologize that I wasn't here earlier. Bennett, did you guys cover kind of what we do? I don't want to give you guys another commercial. If just a little bit? Okay. I'm going to keep it really high level. So we're about 2.5 years old. We deconstructed the Arizona Department of Commerce and created the Arizona Commerce Authority. And we have a traditional economic development focus around business attraction. So we've got a team that's hunting around the planet to convince companies to move or grow in Arizona. But what I'm really proud of and what I'm responsible for is our business development team. And so we're responsible for starting and growing businesses in Arizona. And believe it or not, it's a relatively novel approach to combine all of those things into a statewide economic development organization. So we're really proud of that. And I'm going to stick to business development today for the most part, because that's what I'm responsible for and what I'm most proud of. So I was asked to talk about why entrepreneurism is so important. So I'm going to assume that we're all kind of on board with that, but we'll try and drill down into it a little bit. So I apologize. I know you were asked this earlier. Can you show of hands? Entrepreneurs in the room? Awesome. About a dozen hands. Cool. So my first example, why is it so important? We're super excited and really proud of the recent Apple announcement. So that's a traditional economic development project. Apple is making a huge investment in Arizona in manufacturing. And it's really interesting. I engage with some economic development colleagues in a manufacturing program that are based in Northern California. And they don't consider Apple a manufacturer because they don't manufacture in their community. And they're going to manufacture in Arizona. So that is huge for us. A company of Apple's stature can't afford to make an investment of the scale that they're doing in a community that does not have an entrepreneurial ecosystem, that doesn't have a strong workforce, that doesn't have the basic assets that can support a company of that stature. So congratulations to all of us. That's huge for our business community. So we're only beginning to understand how that's the implications of that in terms of supply chain and all the services that will be wrapped around that. In terms of, I've seen a little bit of content in the newspapers that, it's cool, but they're just making glass. It's a bit more than that. It's pretty exciting what they're doing. So it's bleeding edge technology, and they chose to invest in our community. And I know that has a lot to do with part of the value proposition to them was how strong our entrepreneurial community is. Innovation is here. Smart people are here, and smart people come here. And that's an important component that's critical for Apple. So let's revisit why entrepreneurism is so important in a few more minutes. But I wanted to talk about a few, you can call them gaps or opportunities that I think we can look at in terms of programming. I think that it's really critical for all of us to revisit the value proposition that we present to entrepreneurs around why should they work with us? Why are our programs important? And we need to think like entrepreneurs all the time. So we need to test. We need to validate. We need to be willing to fail. Someone said that earlier. It's okay to fail. Make fast, small failures and learn from them. And I think you all agree with me, the game has changed in terms of what we measure. So it's not about butts and seats. It's not about traditional classwork only. That's not compelling to a lot of entrepreneurs. They don't have the time, they can't do that. The semester, that's irrelevant to a lot of entrepreneurs. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So how do we create programming that is kind of just-in-time programming, that addresses what entrepreneurs need, that addresses it on a timeline that makes sense for them? And how do we scale? That's another reason why butts and seats just doesn't work all by itself. And the example I want to use is we tested a few different programs. We were fortunate to have some funding that we could put out there in the form of a non-dilutive capital, equity capital, for entrepreneurs. And they came in droves. And we learned a lot about our tech startup community. We asked them for information. We collected data, and it completely changed how we looked at our community. And I can give you some data points on that. I think the SBDCs do a great job of that. Your value proposition is, we're here to help you, but you have to provide information to us. We have to report back on the impact that we're having. I think, again, the SBDCs are really good at that. I'm not sure that any of us are leveraging the information that we receive well enough, because that's huge. The data point I'm most excited about. Everybody knows there's no venture capital in Arizona, right? I would argue it's a little different. It's a little more nuanced than that. In one round of the Arizona Innovation Challenge, again, it's a program that's focused on tech businesses, and I understand there's a lot of folks in the room that have a broader mission than that. One round of the Innovation Challenge, our companies told us they had raised more than $150 million. Who knew? Now, that doesn't show up on venture capital reports unless there's a big bump. Infusionsoft gets $50 million, and then the VC report and the Money Tree report goes like this, big bump. The rest of the time, flatline. No venture capital in Arizona. If those investments aren't made through our angel network groups, nobody's measuring it. It doesn't show up anywhere. That's friends and family money that's being invested in startups, and some traditional debt as well. But that's a different story, right? Does that surprise anyone? That's one round. And so in 2 years, we've had about 650 companies and 1,000 applications come through that program. And so my point is, you've got to scale your customer touch points and collect data as much as possible, because you start to get a different picture. If your sample set is too small, you don't have a complete picture. I'm not suggesting we do, but we have learned so much from creating gravity that brings a lot of folks out, and they're willing, there's a value proposition there for them. It's not just money. We wrap as much service around them as we can. So we connect with you guys. We connect with the entire incubator network. We've started to see some synergies now where the incubator community, by the way, did anyone talk about the Arizona Business Incubator Association first annual conference tomorrow? Anyone talk about that earlier? It's happening tomorrow morning at SkySong. So I would encourage any of you that are here tomorrow to go see that at SkySong. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. The incubators now that we're seeing synergies. So we're starting to see specializations within the incubator community, and we're starting to see the programming line up and coordinate with the Innovation Challenge that happens twice a year. And so some really good things start to happen in the community when we get coordinated. So that's been really important. So what I'd like you to think about with that topic is, what can you do, even if it's a really, really light touch, to scale the touch points you have with customers? And then see what that can do for your value proposition. That's exactly what businesses should be thinking about when they're in startup phase. If they're not touching customers, then it's just to build it and hope they come. And I think that too often we get caught up in that. The second gap opportunity, I think, that is a huge opportunity for the community college network and certainly the SBDC network is just basic financial literacy, managerial and financial accounting. I think that is a topic area that there's a number of different delivery vehicles for that. I think you can pretty easily get outside of traditional formats with that. And we see a gap in our community around that. Some of the things that you'd expect, some of the things that you guys see every day, but some things you might not. What the tech community, entrepreneur tech community is getting really good at is pitching to investors. And what we have learned in some program, we created a program called Venture Ready. This is a really interesting program, I think. We take the top companies that we work with, most of them that don't get a financial award, and we have put together a mentor network of about 200 business leaders across Arizona. And they range from investors to serial entrepreneurs to a lot of corporate people and a lot of service providers. And what we do is we assign an entrepreneur in residence, which is kind of a misnomer. There's really no residence. We don't have an incubator. We don't have a residence for companies, but EIR, entrepreneur in residence, is kind of a term that's understood in the tech startup community. We assign them to a company, and we help the entrepreneur put together a pitch deck. So whether or not they're going to raise capital from an investor, they have to put together a pitch that talks about what's the problem, what's the solution, what's the go-to-market strategy, what's their financial strategy, what's their exit strategy, all these different things that every business needs to understand. And so using that as a common vehicle, they do a series of panels. So we pull together experts who give them very candid feedback. So a couple of things are happening here. The entrepreneurial community is getting really good at talking about their business, first thinking about their business, and then we engage the business community. It's a huge force multiplier for us. So the ACA buys coffee and muffins. That's pretty cheap for me. And we have people come that bill out at hundreds of dollars an hour, and they come at 7:30 in the morning. They have other things they can do. They certainly can make more money by sticking to billable hours, but they volunteer their time to come and help companies because it's exciting. It's exhilarating. They get to network with some of their peers. There's a fair amount of that, but they really just want to help. So there is a huge business community out there that wants to help. And they will get frustrated with our bureaucracy if that's what we show them. But if we don't show that to them, and we kind of keep that's a factor of a lot of things that we do. I share your pain on that. But if we kind of keep that in the background and show a different face to them and make it real easy for them to volunteer and participate, they'll show up. They will show up. So I think that's something that's really exciting. So to kind of wrap on that one, financial literacy is a huge opportunity. Managerial and financial accounting, the basics, the real basics. But also, how do you pitch? I'm so excited about this. I find myself using this format, the standard pitch deck, for projects that I want to pitch to the team, that I want to pitch to my boss, that I want to pitch to my wife. You know, I think about, okay, what's the problem? What's the solution? What am I asking for? So I think that we're starting to see some commonality in our community again, because companies now that are coming through the incubators, the successful ones have fed this back into the system. They know if they make it through the semifinal round, the final round, and they have a chance to come in and pitch to our panel of investors and entrepreneurs, it's going to be a certain format. They're going to have their game together. So everybody's kind of getting it coordinated. I had an opportunity to visit a really cool incubator about 2 years ago in Nashville. And they were, when the Startup America, which is kind of faltered a little bit or slowed down anyway, but Startup America was just getting started. And they were the first region to become a chapter. So it was Startup Nashville. And really dynamic guy behind that program, and a community much smaller than Phoenix, smaller than Tucson, but larger than some of the rural communities that we have here. But one of the things that I took away from that was, he said everybody in town knows exactly what investors and business leaders are going to be looking for. So they've landed on the standard format. And I didn't forget about that. So I think we've made a lot of progress in that regard in this community. So financial literacy. One that I want to ask for your help on. I don't have a solution, but I have a couple of ideas. I've heard a couple of things earlier today about global awareness and international. And I want to maybe put a little bit different spin on it than I think what others were suggesting, but we're famous for not being as globally aware as we need to be. We've got a huge Hispanic community here, so we've got some obvious leverage that we could think about in terms of Mexico and Latin America. We've got a lot of international business going on. It's not as much as I'd like flowing through our provider network, or that's not the right way to describe it, but I think that we can learn a lot from what's already happening. We get criticized a lot for, I think someone told me, is Rudy still here? Rudy Vetter? Someone told me the other day we're 30th in exports and all these kind of things, and we need to improve that. There's no doubt. I think that the time when we can say, well, export, that's only a certain kind of business, and, we're a rural community, how does that impact? There's so few businesses now that you really need to consider international business from the time the business is on a napkin. So I think it's really important that you have that conversation with your clients. Only a very localized service business. That's about it. That's all that's left, that you don't have to consider these things. But that's not what I'm thinking about so much today. I have an idea, and I'd like to have some feedback from you on it. I've had the opportunity to travel a bit internationally recently, and we still have the reputation around the world as the gold standard of entrepreneurism. America's kind of got that. It's perceived, and I believe it has, that entrepreneurial spirit, some kind of juju that the whole world, is really excited about. And I think that we sometimes lament our gaps and think about, we're not Silicon Valley, or we're not this community, we're not that community. But in general, I think that we do really well. And I think that around the world, we are perceived as having this incredible entrepreneurial spirit, this incredible ecosystem around supporting entrepreneurs. And now, if you remember what I just talked about a moment ago, our community of business leaders that is more than willing to volunteer their time and get engaged, I think we have an opportunity around a very light touch, but a connection point to international business. And what I'm talking about is, I think it would be very easy for us to leverage some virtual tools and offer up interaction with an international business community, especially in communities that don't have the kind of ecosystems that we have. And I'm talking about rural communities as well. I've bounced this off of businesses as I've traveled around a bit, so I can only speak to it anecdotally, but it excites people. And again, it's not that expensive to use virtual tools and get companies working together. And it's an engagement point. Let's face it, it's kind of sexy too. If you think about engaging your business community and you can talk about something like this, I think you'll be surprised at how many people will show up and want to help and want to learn from it. That's another benefit that we see. As we engage the business community, they get excited about how their tax dollars are being spent. They get excited about having access to deal flow. Instead of wondering how that money's going into the government, how's it being spent? They get to help us be successful. And I think that it's something that I'm just thinking about, but I think there's a real opportunity there. And I think that if you think about whether it's metro or rural communities around the world, they have a lot of the same challenges. And I think that Phoenix combined with Tucson, combined with what we're starting to call Greater Arizona, I think that we bring a formidable kind of value proposition to something that could be exploited a little bit internationally. So that was kind of the third topic. How much time do I have, Otis? You'll have to cut me off because I'll keep going. I know. Oh, wow, awesome. Well, let me stop then. I had no intention to talk at you guys. Surely you must have some feedback for me, questions, might disagree. I can get you going. I'm from the state of Maricopa. Is that getting anyone riled up? Yes, ma'am.
Can you expound on, if I correctly, you mentioned that accounting is important, one of the skill sets. Could you expound on that? We had a discussion about just how much accounting our students need as they put together their business plans.
Yes, and I want to talk about students a little bit because I haven't talked about that. But first, it's shocking to me how many entrepreneurs that we interact with that we see a lot of corporate refugees. So we see a lot of we have technology in Arizona, especially in technology space. And I'm sorry, that's been my focus for so long. I keep going there, but we have technology that I'll put up against any market anywhere. And we have a lot of the corporate refugees. So a lot of folks that are really smart, might be engineers, have come up in, might work for one of our big manufacturers and have some great ideas and get together with some colleagues and launch a business. And it's shocking the lack of financial experience and literacy that they have. And a lack of understanding about how you can bootstrap your way into growing a business versus really, having decades of experience of having lots of support system around them. So I think that's one area. Now jumping over to students, I think that, well, students almost by definition, not exclusively, but a lot of students are going to be younger and lacking in experience. And they're going to get really fired up about the nature of their business, not necessarily running their business. And it's just, financial literacy is something that hasn't changed a lot with market conditions changing. The basics are still the basics, and I think that's something that really begs itself to be delivered in so many different ways. And that's a natural fit, I think, for any kind of community college system. I think where we get hung up is, and I know you guys already know this, but we get hung up in, if it's going to take me 12 weeks, a couple hours every Tuesday to get to the point where I understand, basic accounting, a fast-moving entrepreneur isn't going to be interested in that. Does that address your question at all?
For those folks that come to us to work on their small business plan, their business plan,
yep.
We just have had this discussion. The team of folks that teach that class have said, we may not need to show them as much about, the accounting equation and debits and credits and the journal and the ledger. We really need to talk more about how does the income, revenue.
Oh, totally agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Totally agree with that.
Okay.
Especially around forecasting.
Cash flow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cash flow. Cash flow. You could stop right there and say, if you could just, build some financial literacy around cash flow.
Okay.
We can take care of the rest of it. Really, with early stage businesses, no doubt. Yeah, I totally agree with that. What else? What are you guys seeing? What I didn't hear, I heard a couple of times when we went around the room and talked about working with partners. How are we not helping enough? I know for a fact that, Bennett's team, we're pushing people out to the SBDCs. We like to think we're pretty aware of the programs that are out there. We don't have any workforce people here today, but our workforce folks are end-to-end in this state. I think if you check in with your local, is anyone focused on workforce that's here today? I know Randy was here earlier, Randy Kimmons. I mean, if you check in with any of your workforce people, I think they would tell you that the ACA workforce has been a good partner with them. So we try and be aware of what's going on and in many cases lead. But workforce isn't, in my opinion, if you're talking really small businesses, something comes a little bit later. So usually it's cash flow, staying alive, getting started, staying alive. So, but I think that, I don't know about you, but we don't know enough about our small businesses. And I want to make a distinction. I talked about data earlier. I'm talking about primary data. I'm not talking about buying data sets. That's important to kind of understand where your customers might be. but that doesn't help you understand what your customers are doing. And by the way, primary data is something no one else has because it's yours. And I don't mean that you don't share it. I mean, it's generated from your customer touch point. It's something that's unique. You can't buy it. You have to generate it. You have to create it yourself in your engagement with your customer. So I should have made that distinction earlier. That's really, really important. And I think it's the best way to better understand what we're doing and how we can get better at what we're doing. And that's how we counsel our businesses, always. That's how we evaluate them, is go out and get a customer. Until then, it's theory. So, I hear some discussion around, I'm really proud of the incubator network that's emerged here, and had a chance to talk to Jasper a little bit earlier, and he said, yeah, we're here. We know you guys are just on fire. And again, I encourage you to come tomorrow and meet some of the incubators. I think that's definitely a big part of the equation, and there's a whole continuum of different kinds of incubators and accelerators, all the way to just co-working spaces, places that people can network together. It's not a monolithic. There's no, the old model of an incubator is only a bricks and mortar kind of thing is long gone. There are lots of those, but there are lots of different models. They're really important. That's a high touch kind of value proposition, the ones where they work really closely day in, day out with companies, but that doesn't scale. It's really important that you have the right businesses in there and you wrap the right services around them, but how many companies can you work with at a time? So I'm suggesting that's part of the answer to what we need to provide in our communities, but it's only part. So I'm really interested in collaboration around how can we better understand our small business community? And again, it does not mean getting Kaufman's report. That it's important. I love those guys. I love all the reports, but that's secondary kind of data. And we were one of the first to embrace the Kaufman rating that was a year or so ago. Arizona's #1 in entrepreneurship in the country. Well, yeah, we market the hell out of that. But you dig into it a little bit, it reflected some things that were market conditions. That lots of people were out of work, so lots of people started businesses. So that was a great thing for us at that time. And I think this is a great state for starting businesses and being an entrepreneur. But again, I'm really interested in that primary data and how we can scale that, create gravity, bring lots of folks to your services, and then let's measure. Let's measure what's going on with them, and then lastly, use that to get better at what we do. Any more questions for me? You can be very critical too. I'm happy to address that. Yes, sir.
So I'm from Seattle, Washington. Talking about international
trade dependent. Wow, I haven't heard that phrase.
You mentioned you have a strong, a huge Hispanic community.
Yeah.
I've been at the conference here today. I haven't heard one person say bilingual. Now, I don't know if that's just because it's a given or because it's ignored. So at my school, most of when we say bilingual, Hispanic is the largest growing minority in the Puget Sound region. But when we say bilingual, we're talking primarily about Pacific Rim languages.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard one person say anything about bilingual, even though you identified that as a huge population. How does that jibe?
What do you guys think? I think it's a huge gap. Huge gap. I think we have so much, we have so much international business going on that is not flowing through traditional channels. Or, I don't even know how to describe it. Yes, sir.
It might be a gap in the colleges, but openly with everybody that's going to start a business, that they need to have some command of the Spanish language if they're going to be hiring people down there, because that's probably who they're going to be hiring. Now, the college may not have an official position on that. I don't know. We teach it. We teach command Spanish for entrepreneurs who own a business and want to know how to order people around. So we're ahead on that. We're thinking about it. We just don't make a big deal out of it. It's pretty much understood.
Yeah. This doesn't directly address your question, but so I was recently in Israel, and there was a number of things that I was trying to accomplish, but one of them was we're going to launch a really cool program with the Israeli government, and they've been doing this for 25 years, better than anyone else. It's joint R&D, and so part of our value proposition that we were pretty proud of that we went over there with was we would like to present ourselves as not only are we going to do that with you, but we would like to offer our services as the gateway to Latin America and specifically Mexico, which I think is a value proposition. However, I was very quickly schooled by every Israeli I talked to. They know a lot more about what's going on in Mexico than I do. So, I was really humbled by that and reminded of, it's a lack of awareness, just general global awareness, literacy in multiple languages, something we lament a lot about. We have a really strong leadership in our business community, in our Hispanic business community, I think. But that's interesting. I appreciate you pointing that out. I think something that needs to be addressed. I'd like to hear from others too. That's Jim, right? Yeah, I appreciate that, Jim.
Start a business, one of the first things we do is introduce them to Ralph Varela, who's the CEO of the Pinal Hispanic Council, because they'll need those contacts. They'll need that support group around them. I can't give it to them.
Yeah.
So we partner with Ralph on a number of things that might be interesting to you. We're partnering with him on a restaurant incubator because we have people that think they want to start a restaurant, and I want to be able to say, all right, fine, work here for 2 or 3 months and tell me if you still want to start one. And it will also be a facility that deals with the developmentally disabled. So we're partnering with the Arizona Foundation for the Handicapped because there are jobs in restaurants that those folks can handle. In fact, we've discovered there are some management jobs in those restaurants that those folks can handle. We think we don't tell people how to run businesses, understand. All we do is provide opportunity. And so this is an opportunity for them. So yeah, we do. We partner specifically with the Hispanic community, and I'm going to assume a lot of my counterparts do that too. They don't do it. It's not something written in their goals, but they do it because it's a humanitarian thing to do to be sure that everybody has an opportunity for useful work.
How do you guys interact with, a more general question, but I'd love it if the answer comes in the form of, with Hispanic community or any other community. How do you guys, do you work with the general business community? I know you have folks that are business leaders that are on your boards and things of that nature, but are they embedded in your operations in any way? So I'm really fascinated and pleasantly surprised every time I put an ask out there and think that nobody's going to show up. They show up in droves. Yes, sir.
To go back to your the bilingual question, I'm from the LA area, and I was surprised when I went there and found out that we had 0 Latin or Spanish-speaking advisors, and we have 0 Spanish-speaking courses in LA. And I thought that was the first thing that I should be putting into place now that I'm the associate director. And what I was told very succinctly is that the reach has already been there to the Latin community, and they don't trust us because we're government. So there has to be a different way to go about it sometimes. It's not that the desire isn't there or that the word bilingual isn't in our system. It's that we can throw out a whole bunch of different things, but a lot of times they will not show up because of what they perceive us to be. So we do have to have somebody in their community, but that all goes back to funding.
We're fortunate in Arizona. We don't have any of those immigration issues that you guys have.
No, you don't. No, not at all.
No, it's I think, we're just famously, I think we're a couple of years after some very controversial stuff that is not impacting us directly as much as it did, in the economic development world. But still, we sent not the best message to the Hispanic community. So, yes, ma'am.
I'm Michelle again, and prior to being at CCI, I ran what the City of New York calls a Business Solutions Center. My Mayor Bloomberg, everything has to be his way, but it was an SBDC. But so I know, and so we faced the same issue. I worked in Lower Manhattan. We had English-speaking population, Spanish-speaking population, and also a Chinese population who spoke both Mandarin and Cantonese. And so what we did is we partnered, and we talked about this earlier in the day, partnered with existing organizations and actually ran workshops at their centers that they sort of we worked with the community, saw what did they need, sort of created like win-win partnerships. We need to get our financing numbers up. These folks need financing. It's hard to do that in Cantonese when I only speak English. And so how do you partner together to sort of do that work? And we ended up not doing it on site, but partnering with folks in the community who were already serving these entrepreneurs to make sure that that was working for both of us. Get out of the building.
Yeah, get out of the building. Right. Touch your customers. Yep. No doubt about that. Yes, ma'am.
I'm with the Arizona SBDC, and I could solicit my directors to help me out. But in most of our centers, we do have bilingual analysts. In fact, we did an exercise at our last all hands where we speak. We have all kinds of languages that our counselors are fluent in.
Awesome. Yes, sir.
With that, we've the SBA's recognized that as well. And in fact, one of the things that we needed that they asked us to work on was to have more international trade certified counselors.
Right.
And actually, here in the state of Arizona, there's only 4 NASBATE certified counselors for international trade. 3 of those are SBDC counselors, are SBDC advisors or center directors, and so we do have one of our key centers down in Cochise. I think Mark's already left. Anyway, Mark Schmidt and his team, they've actually hired somebody who is from Mexico, but is living here in the U.S., and she works with the consulate both in Mexico and also works on this side of the border. So we've got a very strong resource there available to us. So not all of us have a really strong Hispanic customer base that we work with, but if we have somebody that comes in, because we believe very much in shared resources, if I don't have that expertise or I can't speak that language, we immediately get Cecilia involved or one of the other center directors involved to be able to provide those resources for them. So we have the tools. I think we just need to know who they are and where they're available for us and be able to get them involved. But anyway, we've made some really good strides the last year within the AZS BDC network to be able to try and overcome, I think, some of these, the whole SB 1070 and all of that. The other thought I had on that a few minutes ago was I wonder if some small businesses are resistant to doing that because of that whole stigma that's going on right now of saying, well, if I put my business in a position where I'm catering to them, am I showing that I am a proponent for this whole political issue, or am I a opponent of this political issue? And I'm not trying to open up a can of worms here, but
imagine my position at the moment.
If we try and promote that, are we accepting it? If we don't promote it, are we against it? And so I think it's a real touchy situation there, but we have to be prepared for whoever walks in our door to take care of them.
I don't know this. I can't validate this with data, but I think that part of getting past that is getting a better understanding of the international business component of that, the business that is happening. That is because, in our case, mostly specifically our Hispanic community is doing international business. That changes things from some of the classic criticism around. Yes, sir.
I wanted to just add in two things. One is it would be just interesting to track Coca-Cola across from Mexico into the state that's becoming quite a thing these days, made with real sugar, from an international trade point of view. But how many of you know about DATOS? Happens every year.
Yeah.
I was afraid. Each year, the Hispanic community comes together. They work on this all year. They pull together primary data on the Hispanic market. It includes everything you need to know about what's going on in terms of financing and growth and development in Hispanic businesses and the like. They present it at a fine affair. And I go to these myself each year, and I sit there surrounded by my Hispanic friends from the Hispanic leadership. And that's not right. We all should be going to that. We all should be paying attention to that. That's good primary research being done, much of what you're calling for. And they're already doing it and sharing it with each other in a large open forum, thousands of folks each year. And the second thing I wanted to mention is, you want primary data on small businesses? How about a partnership between your organization and these community colleges?
For sure.
You find a way to fund us to go out into our communities and do an organized, structured study, which you can help us figure out how to do, and actually do a complete analysis of what's going on in the state from community college to community college area around the state.
I would love to do that, and would like to maybe a nuance of that would be back to what I talked about creating gravity is the best way that I know of to not have to pay for a study, but more to embed it in your operations. I mean, if we're doing, and it takes some time to get there, and we have to experiment, we have to be willing to fail. But if we find something that creates the gravity for more engagement, then then we're mindful enough to think about how can we learn while we're doing this. That's when you get a flywheel effect, I think, and that's when you get something that is not a study that sits up on the shelf, because too often that's what happens with that. But something that, if we get good at what we're doing and it creates that gravity, that's really, really powerful. Yes, sir.
Up to do something as a project, and it's
a better way of saying
our
what I just said.
mindset in Pinal County, at least the one that the people who work for me have, if they're smart, is that a lot of the issues that we talk about, border issues, can literally be resolved by trade. And I mean, all you've got to do is wander through Algodones sometime and see what goes on there, and imagine that as a model. And then you wonder why do we have some of the pricing we have? Why do we have some of the distribution restrictions and other problems that we have, when I can resolve that by parking and walking 200 feet and all those problems go away? So it's a common sense sort of a thing. But we believe that by increasing trade, we may not get rid of all the border problems, but we make them a continually smaller piece of the equation. The issues are still going to be there. And I'm an ex-narcotics agent, so I know we're not going to get rid of drugs. But we make the drugs a smaller piece of the whole question. And then the bigger piece becomes the good stuff, the cross-border employment and the better health care, and on and on and on, things that benefit both societies. That's the way we're looking at it anyway. If I'm wrong, I'll admit that, but I don't think I'm going to be wrong.
Well, I just want to give you my thanks for doing what you do. I think that entrepreneurs get out of bed in the morning to solve problems, right? And it's the most optimistic group of people that exist. And so I congratulate you and thank you for supporting them. That's why I get out of bed in the morning, to help them do what they do. So it's really, really important work. Hopefully I don't have to convince you of that. That's why you do what you do. So thank you very much.